Hey, what's up? Rafael Cortez back on the CEO Pulse podcast, where you get the real, the raw, and the mind of entrepreneurship. Today, we are sitting down with Josh Cantwell. He's the CEO of Freeland Ventures, and he's a strategic real estate coach. But I'm telling you, this guy has been on the panel with the likes of Kevin O'Leary, Barbara Corcoran, Donald Trump Jr. I mean, his experience is extensive. He's never had a boss. Check this out. He's never had a boss. A lot of times we have people on the show that come in because they got tired of the corporate world and then they jumped into it, right? But he's never had a boss, and he went right into entrepreneurship right after college. So his story, and I think the wealth of knowledge that we're about to come across, it's going to be very, very valuable. We're going to be tapping into the 8 traits. Check this out: the 8 traits that elite entrepreneurs need to have in order to reach success. So, Josh, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you stopping by, and thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, Rafael. Man, I'm looking forward to this. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. So break it down for us. I mean, you have an extensive, history in terms of being an entrepreneur, and I mean, you've done presentations. You specialize in a lot of things. Break it down for us.
Sure. So I think first of all, the first thing I want to recognize is entrepreneurship is not for everybody. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurship it's a war. It's a war. It's a war of time. It's a war of time management. It's a war of cash flow. Entrepreneurship is a war of, kind of being pulled in multiple different directions. I call it the OCD loop, and we'll talk about that later. It's a war of winning clients, winning customers, winning deals. And so I think the first thing to recognize when we talk about being an elite entrepreneur, and especially an elite entrepreneur in real estate investment, whether it's residential, commercial, is we have to realize that entrepreneurship is a battle. It's a war. It's in a war that you got to get into to win. And so if you're going to get into it because you just want free time, you want to have freedom, like free time, freedom is something you get because you are a successful entrepreneur, not the reverse. You don't just, hold your flag up and say, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm free, I have freedom. It's actually the opposite. When you decide to be an entrepreneur and a real estate entrepreneur, what you're really signing up for is to work your face off, to work hard, to work fast, to be smarter, to work longer hours in order to eventually have the freedom, right? So if you are wanting freedom, if you are desiring freedom, and you're willing, that is the definition of entrepreneurship, is the battle for freedom. Okay. Because every entrepreneur, when they leave the corporate world, like I was never in the corporate world, like you mentioned, Rafael, but when I got into it, I was lucky because my father was already an entrepreneur. My dad, I witnessed him create his own business in the financial services world, doing employee benefits. And he worked in the corporate world for a long time. He made the leap into entrepreneurship when I was in college. So I got to see it firsthand, the struggle, the battle, him staying up late, working hard, fighting for customers, fighting for deals. So I was lucky to have that firsthand in my own household. And so I was, when I got out of college, frankly, Rafael, I was like, hey, Dad, I'm graduating from school. I'm not going to get a job. And my dad was like, what? What do you mean? And I was like, Dad, I'm just going to follow in your footsteps. I'm going to bet on myself, and I'm going to become an entrepreneur. And he freaked out. He thought for sure I'd go get a job in some sort of accounting firm or something like that. And then when I brought my first $10,000 check when I was 22 years old, right, from entrepreneurship, he probably looked at himself in the mirror and said, you know what, like he's been a good example to me. Mm-hmm. And he was. And so entrepreneurship, that's really where it begins, right? And I just want to recognize that before we even get into some of these traits, that's the battle that you're fighting. And if you're not willing to fight that battle, don't get into entrepreneurship. It's okay to just go into the corporate world. It's okay to work for a large company, because when you're an entrepreneur, you're signing up for late nights, you're signing up to miss some activities, you're signing up to do some things in order to eventually have that personal and time freedom that everybody wants, right? That's the battle.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I think the battle is going to be definitely laid out. There's a lot of challenges that we're not accounting for as we're coming into it. And I was just having a conversation yesterday about my first business and all the mistakes I made, like on the financial section of my business, right? But you're completely right. I mean, and your track record proves it, right? You have over 3,000 apartment units owned with JV partners, over $40 million in managed private money. So I mean, you've been through the ringer. You've been tried and tested, and the skill set and the thick skin that you got to have to handle some of these high pressure environments. It's definitely something that you just I don't think it's yeah, you have to sign up for it. And I've had the conversation too about whether entrepreneurs are born or they're made. I think it's a combination of desire, which comes innate, but you're also, I mean, you can build up those skills, but you got to be willing to put in the work, right? Willing to dig the trench and go through it. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the sunset's going to look great when you're done with your entrepreneur career, but the whole thing is going to be I mean, you're going to be duking it out left and right.
Absolutely.
Stuff done.
To your point about are entrepreneurs born or made? They're made. They're made. They're not born that way. Okay. And I'll give you an example. Like, I've had multiple employees of mine, probably around 5 or 6 of them, that have come to work for me that were in the regular job world. I hired them through maybe a recruiter, a regular hiring process. They worked for a year or 2 years or 5 years. And eventually they left my company to become an entrepreneur because they saw me do it firsthand.
They got empowered.
They do it firsthand. They never thought they'd be an entrepreneur. Then they saw the freedom that I had to make my own choices, to do the things I wanted to do, the income that we made. But sometimes we had great years, massive 7-figure incomes, and other years we lost money and we got our teeth kicked in. I've experienced it all. So I would submit to you that entrepreneurs are made, because you have to have somebody that leads the charge, somebody to learn from. So this podcast is an amazing tool for your listeners, Raphael, to be able to say, okay, how many people are going to become entrepreneurs by listening to this podcast? Because you're the mentor that they never had. Like, my dad was my mentor. I've been a mentor to my employees who became entrepreneurs. And so it's important that you personally witness somebody else doing it, so you know. And honestly, Raphael, this leads me to my first trait of elite entrepreneurs, which is to understand, first of all, number one, that no one is coming to your rescue.
Ooh,
okay? No one's coming to your rescue when you're an entrepreneur. And you said, ooh, right? So that hits right in the gut, right? Gut punch. Number one, no one's coming to your rescue. So I'll give you an example. In 2011, I had a very large income. We had a very successful wholesaling business. We were flipping short sales. We were teaching it. We were doing huge events in Vegas and Dallas, all over the country. And I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So at 35 years old, I was diagnosed with a terminal illness. For most people, which is terminal. I was one of the lucky few. Pancreatic cancer has just an 8% survival rate. And here I am 10 years later, lucky to be one of the 8%. But the first thing I realized at that time was I was 100% responsible for my own life. I was 100% accountable to my own life. I was able to build and design my own life, but no one was coming to my rescue. And so when you're super challenged, whether it's a cash flow challenge, whether it's a deal flow challenge, whether it's a cancer challenge, whether it's an employee leaves and takes your best employees or your best customers, no one's coming to your rescue. And when you realize that, and you sort of realize that you need to be superhuman, you need to pull the t-shirt apart and have that big S on your chest, and you need to be the one that comes to your own rescue, like Superman comes to other people's rescue, you realize, number one, that ultimately becomes a very freeing, very empowering feeling to know that it's up to me and I can do it. Right? So no one's coming to your rescue. That's absolutely number one. And I think, if you're going to become an entrepreneur and you think like, well, we have a cash flow problem, I got to go talk to mommy and daddy and maybe they'll loan me some money. That's not the answer.
Yeah.
Right?
As an entrepreneur, everything is a you problem. Everything.
Yeah.
Extreme ownership. That's the definition of extreme ownership right there.
Yeah, you probably read Jocko's book, right? It's one of my favorites. Extreme ownership.
The second core principle, extreme ownership.
That's right. No one's coming to your rescue, right? Now, we that kind of leads me to number 2, which is still about elite entrepreneurs.
Hmm.
As the leader of your entrepreneurial enterprise, you're going to have employees, you're going to have vendors, you're going to have contractors. Number 2 is you as the CEO must have super time management skills. Super time management skills. Okay. So one of the things I do is every Sunday night, I post and prioritize my week. Every Sunday night, after my kids go to bed, I go back to my home office. Usually I turn on the football game. If it's, during the football season, maybe I'll grab a drink, a cocktail, but I sit down and I go through my entire next 2 or 3 weeks and I lay out everything that needs to be done and the specific day, and I book it into my calendar. Okay. And with that, I break my day and my week down into 3 types of days: a free day, a focus day, and a buffer day. Okay. A free day is a day where I do no work at all. I literally am like trying to turn my phone off. I answer no emails, no text messages, and I manage my time by just completely pulling myself out of my business. Okay. I typically do that on Saturday and Sunday, but also I'll do that during the week sometimes, maybe on a Wednesday or maybe on a Tuesday, and just completely exit my business. Okay. That's a free day. Now, the best part about that, Raphael, those free days, is those are the days that I get my best ideas. Because I'm not in the muck of work. Sorry if my phone's going off. I think it's my wife's phone linked in my computer. So we're just going to keep going with this interview.
Keep rolling. You're good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But so that's the free day, right? The next day is what's called a focus day. Now, a focus day is a day when we are absolutely dialed in to revenue production. Okay, so if you're a real estate entrepreneur, that's you're raising money and you're finding deals. That's the main strategy, the main way that we make money in real estate is find money to fund our deals and find great deals. That's the focus day activity. So find deals, find money, find private investors, find bank funding, find hard money lending, whatever that is. And then you're focusing on deal flow, right? Deal flow, meaning look for apartment deals, look for, if you're in residential, be making offers. That's your focus day. The third day is what's called a buffer day. My wife must be busy on her text messaging. So sorry about that. But buffer day is so important.
In my head, I think it's almost like sound effects because of the great nuggets that you're dropping. Yeah. Every time you say something great, it just bing. Yeah.
So the last piece of that is a buffer day. Now, buffer day for me is Monday, Friday. And those are the days when I have my meetings, when we regroup, we think, we strategize as a team. I take meetings with my staff. Maybe it's a little bit less of a hectic day. It's not quite as intense. And those are the days when I do all the other things in business that I need to do that are just not really revenue producing. Okay. Maybe I'm calling somebody back. Maybe I'm talking to a vendor, returning some emails. So if you break your week down to this free day, focus day, buffer day. Now, I cannot take credit for this system. This is Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan, I was in a training program with him 20 years ago. This is very similar to the strategy that he taught. I learned it from him. I've incorporated it into my life. But this is the second main trait of elite entrepreneurs is super time management skills. You cannot waste time. You cannot just have downtime and parts of your week that fall apart. There's no way that the rest of your team is going to operate at a high level if you're not operating at the highest level.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the first principle, which is nobody's going to rescue you, right? So you have to have, you got to keep your stuff in check.
That's right. Exactly. Now, number 3 here, Raphael, is really important. Like there's technology all around us. And so I like to tell people, look, we have to use technology as a weapon. Okay, there's so much good technology out there, but most people only use 10% of it or 30% of it. There's all kind of great software platforms, all different kinds of great CRMs for real estate, all these different kind of things. And if you're not adopting it, it's not going to help you. So we say with our team, if it's not in the software, it didn't happen. Okay. So we say it didn't happen. So if you found a deal and you're evaluating it, and if you don't put those notes in the software, you never saw that deal. right? If we're doing property management, we own over 3,000 units of apartments. And if you're collecting rent and you're not putting that in the software, it didn't happen. Okay, if we're raising money for a deal and we're doing it through our syndication software and that deal isn't in the software, it didn't happen, because the only way to grow is when people can collaborate in one ecosystem, one place that is using technology. That way, other people in my business can see what I'm doing. I can see what they're doing. And we don't have to pick up the phone or text people, call people, and ask for updates. The updates go in the system.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Completely agree. Completely agree.
You have to use technology as a weapon, right? And if you're not, look, I would submit to you that there's tremendous amounts of great real estate software out there. And most people buy it. They think it's a silver bullet. It's a red pill, but then they don't actually use it, or they're only half-ass using it. And they wonder, like, well, how come I'm not making as much money? How come we have communication problems? How come we're not able to scale? It's because you're not using technology as a weapon.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I built an operating system for the wholesaling process, and actually, I have a lot of clients under that same operating system, and some of them, I mean, I can tell you maybe 60% actually use the software as is intended. The rest of them use, you know, one feature here, one feature there. It's usually those same clients who call in for the customer support and all that stuff, but they're not going through the whole process, right? They're missing information. There's, it's not a linear. It's meant to be used as through a linear approach, but they're not using it that way.
Right.
Just and what the point I'm trying to make is technology is our friend. Yeah, we may not be the savviest when it comes to being the most techy people sometimes, right? But it doesn't mean that you can't take 3 days to understand the thing that's going to be running your backbone of your business. Right. Yeah, so absolutely give that some due regard, because it's important.
And imagine, you're Rafael, using your software, and maybe the CEO is only using 25% of it. Well, how can the CEO, if they don't adopt the software and use technology as a weapon, how can they expect their employees to use it 100%? So you have to adopt it as the leader of your business first, and then demand that everybody else use it as well. It's the only way to grow and scale.
Yeah.
Trait number 4, look, is you got to know where you're going. And so I started a program, an exercise over 15 years ago. Mm-hmm. Called it the ACER exercise, ACER. ACER stands for absolute clarity of the end result. ACER, absolute clarity of the end result. And so what I encourage all of our listeners to do is to sit down with just a pen and a piece of paper in a quiet, passive place and dream about their end result. What kind of house do they live in? How big is it? What kind of car do they drive? What kind of land do they live on? What kind of team do they have? What kind of business do they have? How much passive income do they have? Do they live on a lake, or do they live on the ocean, right? Do they live in the mountains? Do they ski, or do they surf? How much time are they spending with their kids or grandkids? Where are they traveling to? And I just encourage people to just dream about the end result, because we know the way we're programmed, the way we're created by God Almighty up above is that, listen, whatever we think about, we're eventually going to become. So I see so many entrepreneurs that get into business and they're just trying to make a lot of money, right? Well, what is that money really going to do for you? It's the end result of what you're really striving for, with the house, the car, the relationships, the free time, the vacations, the travel, the charity. If you don't know what that is, and don't look at that on a regular basis, you're going to get pushed around. Like, it's almost like you're on a river floating down toward Niagara Falls, right? That river's so powerful, it's going to push you from side to side. It's going to push you down the river like you're in a canoe with no oar. No, you have nothing to row with. Mm-hmm. If you're going down that same river and you have a team with you, you're in a bigger boat, you've got some machinery, you've got the oars, maybe you got an engine in your boat, you can push the boat where you want to push it, even when the waves and the tide is trying to push your boat in a different direction. So it's the dream of the end result. That's the weapon that you use to keep your business on track, to keep your habits on track, to keep your team on track. So if you haven't discussed with your team what your end goal is, what your end result is, you haven't discussed that with your spouse or your kids, you're making a massive mistake in entrepreneurship. Don't keep that to yourself. Write it down, write down the end result, share it with the world, and especially share it with the world, because the more you project that out to the world, now you're responsible for it, because you don't want to have egg on your face by telling everybody, hey, I want to drive a Ferrari. And then, you know what? Everybody knows that you want to drive a Ferrari. And if you don't drive the Ferrari, you're going to have egg on your face. Now it's all about the negative result of having the egg on your face. That becomes just as much of a motivator as the Ferrari itself.
Absolutely. I mean, it'll comes down to, I think we can use that motivation and then steer it, right? It can be either drive us through fear or drive us through the sense of achievement. But when you have a clear picture like that, when you have a vivid vision of what you want to get to, the stuff that you want to realize, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, I completely agree with the. I love this exercise. By the way, I do it often. Through meditation and when I'm there, and I always write stuff down. In my head, I'll think about something. It doesn't have to be the where I'm at when I'm 90 years old, but it's what I want right now, right? That's what's going to wake me up tomorrow morning. It's going to put that fuel in my tank to wake my ass up and then do something great for that day. Like that absolutely love it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Otherwise, for the sake of what are we doing all this?
That's right. Now, the fifth concept, the fifth trait of elite entrepreneurs is accessibility. Okay. Now this is important. It's what I call the one-to-many concept, right? It's the one-to-many concept. So you and I, Raphael, we're recording this. This is going to go out to many, many people. Mm-hmm. We're going to have an impact on many lives, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people through this podcast. And it's just you and I talking, just having a brotherly conversation, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to have a big business and you want to grow as an elite entrepreneur, you have to find ways to scale your business by talking to many groups of people at once. You're the one, they're the many. So how many situations can you get into where you're delivering a message via a podcast with thousands of listeners, delivering a message through a webinar with hundreds or thousands of listeners, sending out an email or email marketing to motivated sellers or homeowners, or text message marketing, and you're by yourself doing it to hundreds or thousands of sellers at one time. Right? Maybe hosting YouTube videos, there's thousands of watchers. Maybe you run your real estate business and you run TV commercials where those TV commercials are getting in front of hundreds or thousands of eyeballs, right? So the idea here is this one-to-many concept, this one-to-many. How can I, as one person, as often as possible on a daily basis, a regular basis, be speaking to many people, not one-on-one meetings, but 1 to 10, 1 to 100, 1 to 1,000. That's how we scale a business, is this one-to-many concept. So how can I teach? How can I speak? How can I get the message out about my company in front of hundreds, thousands of people at a time? Because I only need a few of those people, maybe the top 1 to 3% to want to work with my business in order for me to just achieve all my financial goals and be a millionaire many, 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 many times over. So you have to be willing to not just be in meetings one-to-one to be an elite entrepreneur. The one-to-many concept is critical to being an elite entrepreneur.
Well, I mean, success is directly correlational to the amount of people that you help, right? Harv Eker talks about that kind of stuff, and it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. The more people that we reach, the more people that we're able to impact, the better on the profitability side, right? Because you get more exposed. That's one. But we also never know the ripple effects that's going to have.
Right.
You have a conversation, you drop the seed somewhere. Even now, I mean, going back to the third principle of technology, you go back to, YouTube, you go back to the ways that we have now accessible to put together a podcast and have a conversation, drop knowledge. You don't know who's going to listen to that, but somehow, some way, I mean, I've had it hundreds of times where I get, messages and people just reach out from something that they heard, right, that resonated, and now they know what I do. I'm, what I'm doing is exposed, it's out there, and it's for people to listen and benefit from, right? And if we have, I mean, it would not be possible if it was just the old, fashion of just one-to-one networking. The reach is a lot less. The ability to help impact and then grow, like you say, it's also going to be a lot more limited. So
That's right. Yeah, we've recruited and raised over $80 million of private money.
Yeah.
A lot of people told me at some point, look, I heard of you. I knew who you were. I was referred to you, but then I listened to your podcast or I listened to your YouTube videos, and I was convinced, even before I met you, that I wanted to do business with you. Right? That's the one-to-many concept. That's a huge trait of elite entrepreneurship.
The one thing in the coaching space, I just kind of want to throw that little comment in there. But one thing in the coaching space is it's very helpful, right? People will begin to date you through social media, through videos, through podcasts, through that kind of stuff. A lot of times, especially if they're investing, for example, in your business model, where they're coming in and they're investing money and then you're giving them a return, they're going to want to date you for a while, right? Before they even pick up the phone, they already have an idea of the person that you are. And that's not possible unless you have the one-to-many. And there's so many different ways. I urge you people out there, if you're not taking advantage of the accessibility of technology and actually putting you don't have to be a full digital marketer, a full content creator 24/7, but if you talk about what you do in a constructive way and you do it from a space of contribution, people are going to listen, they're going to perk up their ears, and they're going to start dating you that way. Now they know you, and that's going to return to you and in the form of business and connection. So yeah.
And look, when you do that, kind of leads us to trait number 6 here, which is, look, if we're speaking in front of large crowds, we're speaking in front of large groups, webinars, email marketing, these kind of things, or just at a networking function, we're talking to people. The follow-up service is so important. So number 6, the elite trait number 6 is service trumps price. Okay. I can't even tell you how many houses I bought, apartment buildings I bought, where people said, I had higher offers from other people, but you got back to me, you followed up with me, and I sold it to you because I like you better, even though you're paying less. Okay. So service trumps price. I would say that I would submit to you again, when you look at property management, we own over 3,000 units of apartments. We demand white glove service for our residents, even if they're, C-class apartment buildings. We own a lot of B-class workforce housing. We own some A-class and some C+, but we try to create the best resident experience. We try to paint all of the common spaces, put in new carpet and flooring on all the common spaces, add dog parks, pavilions, benches, amenities, making sure that we handle trouble tickets super quickly, making sure that our property managers know our residents on a first name basis, right? We seal and stripe all of our driveways and parking lots. All of these kind of things that we can add allows us to charge more for the same exact unit. And really not that expensive. Look, Rafael just got done sealing and striping one of our apartment buildings. It's a 220 unit complex. There's 248 parking spaces, plus there's the handicap spaces and some of the shared spaces in the driveways. We were able to get that done. We got multiple quotes in the 50, 60, 75,000 range. We ultimately got somebody to do that job for 17 grand. So 17 grand to seal and stripe the entire complex. And the residents who used to walk their trash out to the dumpster and wing their trash towards the dumpster, not always in the dumpster, but towards the dumpster. And sometimes the trash would be laying next to the container.
Yeah.
The residents with the previous management, Rafael, they found no value in the extra effort to make sure the trash went in the can.
Made it inside the can, yeah.
But now, because it's sealed and striped, it's black asphalt with yellow seal stripe everywhere. Each parking space is marked and numbered. They look at that and say, wow, like the parking lot looks amazing. So I'm going to make the extra effort to get the trash in the can. Yeah. So now the psychologically, everybody, not only the property management and the ownership, which is us, but the resident, everybody's leveled up their thinking because, again, service trumps price. Ultimately, because of that, we can charge more.
Yeah.
We can charge more for each unit. We have premium units. We're, again, very B-class, normal suburb type of properties, but we're charging more than the rest of our competitors because great service, first name basis, and also because we put together a great resident experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, now you're the great complex in the area, right? It doesn't matter if it's a B B plus or whatnot. I mean, there's going to be some comparables in there, but you're going to be the one that's, oh, they handle it. The management is good. They have this, they have that. And the quality of people that's going to be attracted to that kind of stuff also makes sense. So,
right.
Yeah.
That's right. And look, let me just move right on to this next one. I think this is just the most important of them all, most likely. And then I've got one more on a personal basis is number 8, but number 7 is invest for cash flow now. And the reason why I say that is because, look, for the first 10 years as a real estate investor, from 2001 to 2011, I invested for income. I flipped houses. I did a lot of wholesaling. We made a lot of money, $1 million, 7 figures, multiple years. But ultimately, even those profits had to go somewhere. They had to go into passive, cash flowing real estate. One of the very few regrets, I don't have many regrets, but one of the few regrets that I do have is that I didn't just keep all the properties that I flipped. Now, at that time, again, I needed to wholesale because I didn't have a regular job. I didn't have a W-2 income. It was my business to wholesale and flip properties. That's how I paid the bills. That's how I paid my employees. That's how I made income for my wife and my kids. But I would say, look, if I could think back, if I was a little bit more mature when I was younger, when I was a little bit more mature in business, I would have said, look, I'm okay with not making as much money in my first year, second year, third year, because if I just stack all these assets and keep them all, by the third or fourth year, I'm going to have so much cash flow, I'm going to essentially be retired. I'll be financially independent. So when we went back, if you think about when we all read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, we read Multiple Streams of Income by Robert Allen. We read all these books. What did they talk about? They talked about owning the asset and investing for cash flow. A lot of us get into real estate. I certainly did. And we immediately gravitated towards flipping and wholesaling. Again, nothing wrong with that.
Gratification. I mean, it's
gratification, sure. But it's, I need the money now. I need the $10,000 from a wholesale versus the $150 a month from a rental.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. But I would say, look, just evaluate your business and say, make just enough money from your wholesaling and your flipping to pay the bills and have a decent lifestyle, and invest the rest. Hold every property you can for cash flow. Okay, because look, about 5 years ago, I started investing in apartments. My personal net worth skyrocketed by 8 figures. Over the last couple of years, I started investing in apartments. I went 10 years, almost 12 years investing in real estate, had a nice income, had a nice net worth, but it grew 10x or 20x when I started holding assets and holding apartment buildings.
Wow.
Elite entrepreneurs realize that they've got to invest for cash flow. The other thing I'll say behind this same concept here, Raphael, is look, I've got a buddy of mine who's a very big executive at a private equity company. And the way private equity companies are valued is based on long-term cash flowing contracts. The longer term the contract is, the more the company is worth. So it could be just, maybe it's fiber, it's broadband, it's some sort of contract to provide a service, anything, any of those contracts. The longer the contract is in place for, the more the company will be sold for. It's worth more money. Well, renting out apartments or single family homes is a form of a long-term contract. The more that you book those, the more of those you have on your books, the more valuable your company is. The short-term gratification of a wholesale deal or a flip, I get it. I did hundreds of them. What I'm telling you is do that if that you need that income. But book as many long-term contracts as you can. That's going to explode your personal balance sheet and your net worth.
Yeah, it's very important to keep that, to be aware of that, right? It's coming into it and wanting to get out of that survival stage, especially when we're starting off a business and we have limited funds, we have, limited resources. Survival stage, 100%, right? You come into it, but it's not, I mean, I think the key is not building a habit into operating that way. Yeah, knock out a few deals like that, get instant gratification because you're making cash right now. You see your bank account go to 100K, 200K, but then don't be afraid to start placing that stuff in something that's going to pay you long term. It's not going to look as sexy as a flip, as a check that you get through through something like that, but on the long term, I mean, it does create that security and that wealth being wealth, time, and financial security. So love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I know we're running short on time here, Raphael. We've gone a little long, so let me just wrap up with number 8. Number 8, and this is a personal one, right? Doesn't matter who you are. Elite entrepreneurs, we're all have, man, like technology, social media can be like crack. It can be like cocaine. It can be addictive, right? So the number 8 trait of elite entrepreneurs is that they refuse or avoid what I call the screen sucking OCD loop. Okay? Screen sucking OCD loop. And what I mean by that is, how many times have you woken up? This is just for all of our audience, all of our listeners. How many times have you woke up, you rolled out of bed and you checked your phone, first thing you did, and all of a sudden you looked at all your text messages that came in overnight, and 10 or 15 minutes goes by. Then all of a sudden you check Instagram, you look at some funny videos. Then you go to Facebook and you see the post that came in overnight, how many likes and how many comments you got. Then you look at some, maybe stuff in Facebook Marketplace that took another 15 minutes. Then you go to, your Facebook videos, maybe it's political videos or just some funny videos. You look at that. Then you check a website, maybe a Google News that you look at what happened, what happened in Afghanistan, what happened, with politics, or what happened with sports overnight. And then all of a sudden you go to check your email and you have your one main email account. You're digging into that. You're 30 minutes into that account. Then all of a sudden you check the second email account that you really don't ever check, but you check it anyway. Then you look at your software and you check your sales. And all of a sudden 2 hours goes by and poof, you like pop out of it. You're like, what the hell am I doing? That is the screen sucking OCD loop. You go from one to the next, and it just becomes this loop of non-production. It becomes this loop of inactivity, non-productivity, right?
Yep.
And this includes like negative people that can suck your energy away. It comes negative actions, negative groups, negative networking functions that suck away all these things, social media that can suck things out of your life that provide no value. So what I hear to submit to you as the last trait of elite entrepreneurs is that they use technology and social media purposely, with purpose, with an intent, some way to build their business. We use social media to push out content so that people will look at our stuff. But in reverse, I don't want to look at other people's stuff unless it has a positive impact on my life or on my business.
Right.
The war, like I talked about at the beginning of this interview, the war of entrepreneurship. Now you have a war of attention. It's you pushing out your content, your information to others to get eyeballs on your stuff. You want that. And in reverse, you don't want to get sucked into, especially things that are negative, that are toxic, that are leeches, that provide no value. You don't want to get sucked into that. And I think, look, we're all human. We all get sucked into it. Just recognize it as fast as possible and use technology and social media in a purposeful way to grow your business. Don't just surf.
Yeah, I think discipline falls into that quite a bit. I mean, the freedom is in the discipline, right? The freedom to not waste 3 hours of your day and then be trying to catch up the rest of it. I've been guilty of it in the past. I've gotten a lot better, not 100% better where I want to be, but sometimes I'll still get dragged into that loop, like you say. But it's now I'm aware of it. I'm conscious of it, and then I'll do my, I'll pull myself out of it and then get focused, get back on track. Yeah, it takes some work, but yeah, the battle for attention is definitely out there, right? And yeah, it's trying to kind of manage everything at all at once becomes a trip, man. I love those 8 principles. They make so much sense. Thank you for that. I have one question. I know before we sign off, this is my favorite question to ask, but if you were walking down the street and you ran into your 17-year-old self, so 17-year-old Josh, what would you tell that kid?
Yeah, look, I would probably say 2 things. I would say, look, like looking back, I don't know if my 17-year-old self would understand this, but I would say, look, funding equals freedom. What I mean by that is that as you build your real estate portfolio, which ultimately gives us the financial freedom to do what we want, the funding from true private investors is the last piece of the capital stack that you've got to master. Funding equals freedom, right? So you can get bank financing is pretty easy. Maybe some private equity from private equity funds, debt funds, equity funds. That kind of stuff is out there now. A lot of it, we've used it, but it's the final 5 or 10 or 15, 20% of the capital stack that comes from private investors that ultimately closes and seals the deal that sets you free. And I would encourage my younger self, maybe not at 17, but maybe 21. I got into financial services when I was 21, right? I would encourage that younger self to understand everything I could about the capital stack. And the second thing I would say is, look, own the asset. And I mentioned this during this interview, how many times I flipped houses, I sold houses and things like that. I would keep them all. Now, I'm not perfect. Even yesterday, Raphael, we sold a 5-plex. We bought it for $135 a year ago. We sold it for $225 yesterday. And we were only into it for like $145, $150. We sold it. Now, the reason specifically why we did that and sold it was because we're leveling up our apartments constantly. So we're getting rid of some of our smaller stuff, right? Just because of management efficiencies and those kind of things. So I would say, look, if you do flip and sell some properties, take those dollars and put them into another cash flowing asset, which again is trait number 7. So I would tell my younger self, own the asset, funding equals freedom.
I love it, man. Listen, that's solid stuff. It's solid stuff. Josh, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, maybe reach out and, I don't know, send you a message. Where's the best place to reach you at?
Yeah, we're all over social media, but the best place to go is just our main website. Go to freelandventures.com. There they can see our portfolio, a bunch of example deals, join our mailing list, blah, 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 blah. So just go to freelandventures.com. There's a ton of cool stuff there.
Love it. Freelandventures.com. We'll make sure that we have all that stuff in the show notes. Thank you so much, man. Those 8 trades, I mean, it's been very enlightening. I love it. It's a fresh approach on something, a very pragmatic approach on the mind of an entrepreneur. So
yeah, Raphael, thank you so much, man. I appreciated this interview. Thanks for inviting me on.
Absolutely. Anytime, brother. It's been a blast. Thank you so much. Boom. It's a wrap.